one, make your story brilliant, make it amazing. Two, recognize that depending upon what your goals are, there's a good chance you're going to get to that point, and you might be kind of let down unless you had a good time doing it.
This is The Deep Dive with Adam Roa. What is up, Deep Divers? Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of the Deep Dive podcast. My guest today is Aaron Alexander. Aaron is a movement wizard. Like, really, that's how I see him. And you've worked with some of the world's top athletes and celebrities to relieve physical and mental pain. I know one of your big ethoses is that in order to improve our mental state, we need to improve the way that we move through the world. And so you are a movement coach, you're an author, you are the host of the Align podcast, which is ranked #1 in nutrition on the Apple Podcast. So very popular and successful podcast. And it's such a pleasure to have you here on my podcast, as well as live here in the Create community. Thank you for taking the time out of your Tulum vacation here to join us today.
I appreciate it. I mean, per mentioned, I don't vacation well. I don't actually even really understand the concept of vacation. So my strong preference is to roll my life into other geographical locations. So I appreciate you being a part of that.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I'm starting off these podcasts. Actually, a lot of people do rapid fire questions at the end. I like to do deep dive questions at the beginning. So I got some questions for you, it's actually beautiful because you're such a movement expert. And also, I've been theming these podcasts around my current music releases. And those have had to do with relationships, breakups. And also the most current song that comes out on Friday called Chase Me is actually about kind of like this cosmic, timeless romance. It's soulmates, the idea of soulmates. And so I want to blend both those worlds, your expertise around movement and relationships. And so I have a couple questions here.
Yeah.
The first one, going right into it, getting started right away, is as we think of the physical and relationships, I want to know the 3 top ways that you suggest to amplify your sex life.
Wow. Damn.
That's it. We're diving deep already, going right into the deep end, bro.
Yeah, well, amplify sex life. Well, first you have to define amplify, I guess. So what does amplify mean? Can you give me a definition?
Yeah, to feel more connected, more heat in it, to feel more fulfilled in it.
Yeah, I think love. I mean, for me, I recently had the experience with a person that I was kind of like felt deeper into love with than I had for a while. I think I had a lot of blockages around that kind of protection. And since that, I really enjoyed eye gazing and just like really like absorbing, connecting into that person. Whereas I think I spent a lot of my sexual history kind of like slamming bodies against each other. So I think cultivating love and connection. I think that the deeper that you can go, or that I can go with a person in or outside of the bedroom, of actually, feeling deeply connected to that person, I think that's, for me, that's amplifies the sexual experience the most. But as far as like a specific tool that I found really great, which is like weird for a lot of people, probably nobody that listens to this, would just be like eye gazing. I think, try eye gazing while you're having sex. And it becomes, for me, much more of like a meditation, and allows me to kind of, I think sex is it's an opportunity for us to kind of converge, create some semblance of unity. And I think that's what relationship is in general. And there's something about that eye gazing stuff that I kind of found to be like, oh, it's a little creepy woo woo. But when I actually started tinkering with it, there was really like some sex magic, I would say, that ended up manifesting from it. So that would be a start. That'd be a fine start.
Amazing. And then what about something on your own? So like if you want to have a more vibrant sex life, is an aspect to life itself that you would recommend people start doing on their own that would just translate?
Yeah. I mean, you need to be connected with your body. If you don't know how to dance, sex is probably going to be not nearly as cool for you. So the more that you can start to tap into your own awareness of, tactile sensation and connection to your toes and the backs of your knees and your pelvic floor muscles. And so sex lends itself. It's one of the only real, like, kind of primordial, animalistic experiences that modern day humans still have access to. So much of our lives could be tapped into that more if we were hunting and gathering and, navigating and, see a storm coming in and building shelter and all those like really primal and, dancing around a fire and making music and, all that stuff. That's your ancestry for millennia. Most of that's been cut out. Now the fire is just staring into your blue lit cell phone for 8.5 hours a day. So I think that sex is one of the few real practices or, the things that we do that's really taps you back into like your deep humanity. So it's a really helpful tool. Sex itself is a helpful tool to get back into your movement body and get back into some of those nooks and crannies of yourself that you might not necessarily hit if you're doing like a traditional bodybuilding workout. But I would say go into, maybe try doing a dance class or maybe like an ecstatic dance class or contact improvisation could be an interesting thing. Or maybe even just get yourself like a dry brush, and hang a dry brush up in your shower or your bathroom and, scratch your back and the backs of your legs and, turn on all of those tactile sensors throughout your body because your skin is a continuation of your brain. You'd say your whole body is a continuation of your brain, but your skin, quite literally, it comes from the same dermal layer as your brain. It's called the ectoderm. So embryologically speaking, when a child forms, that brain central nervous system layer and the skin layer, they're continuous. So when someone's licking your elbow or the back of your neck or what have you, they're massaging the neurons in your whole body, in your brain. It's a continuous system. And so you can start to have that more sensual experience with your whole body through something like, massage your legs, use a dry brush, spend time laying on the ground, have more contact with the world around you against your body. So if you're just all the time sitting in some like sofa or a chair, that kind of forms the body into this compressed position, creates collapse. Just the simple practice of, when you get home, if you're watching TV or checking your emails or just hanging out, get yourself some floor cushions, get a comfy rug, make it be like really comfortable, have like whatever, sheepskin or whatever you're into. It could be faux sheepskin, but something really soft that like when you touch it, it almost like makes you like purr in a way. You're like, oh, wow, there's a rug. And all of those are really great factors to start to turn your sensorial self on. And then that naturally rolls into a more sensual relationship with yourself and, anyone that you would invite into your own sensuality.
Yeah. And I think something that's really powerful about what you're talking about too is really you're speaking to the creation of a sensual relationship with the world around you. Right? Like sensuality in many ways. I feel so many people get sensuality and sexuality, just like they intertwine them as being the same thing. And so often when we observe someone who's incredibly sensual, we can sexualize that and people can sexualize that when in reality, to be incredibly sensual is to have that relationship with your body and the world around you in a way that it's more information. And when we talk about more information, I think about higher frequencies, right? Like higher frequency means more information. And so when we in the conscious community are often talking about living in a higher frequency, the more information that your body can be intaking in any moment, which you could argue is the essence of what increasing sensuality is also a higher state of frequency, a higher state of consciousness, of being. And so I love that you spoke to that. And one of the big things, one of my favorite things to do is dance. And you mentioned it a couple of times. I love dancing. I absolutely love dancing. And I feel like that is allowing yourself, dancing specifically, is allowing yourself to get into like energetic union with something outside of yourself, which is the music.
Yeah. And not to mention you can buy like a libido supplement. You start eating more oysters or start eating more beets or chocolate or whatever. And be like, oh, this is like good for libido. It's like anything that makes you thrive as a human being, that makes you feel more vital, boosts your libido. You having a job that is fulfilling to you, that boosts your libido. You just taking a walk outside boosts your libido. You eating healthy food in general, you starting to adapt a perception of your reality that is more, tantric, or sensual, where you can look at a sunset or a cloud or a car driving by you and splashing water on you or whatever. It just becomes more of like more of a test at that point. But you can find the sensuality in literally any experience. You can find the magic or the humor in literally any experience. So if you can start to adapt that perception on a momentary basis, I think that ultimately that's going to be the greatest libido boost that you could possibly find. And so it's like, when you are, sometimes if you talk to like a body language coach or somebody of the sort, they might suggest before you go into a meeting or a date, okay, when you're out in the hallway, you're going to like pull your shoulders back and puff your chest up.
Arms up above your head.
Arms up overhead. Yeah, there's all the Amy Cuddy Harvard research and the testosterone versus the cortisol when you're hunched over in that position for a couple minutes. They found that, and this is contentious research. I put this in my book, but there is contention around it. But they found a person that's in that hunched over kind of loser position for a couple minutes. They did saliva samples with two different groups. The people in that hunch over position, they found that cortisol levels, or as a stress hormone, would increase and testosterone levels would decrease. And then when you go in like the winner, superwoman positions, what they call it, the inverse would happen. So your T levels would go up and stress hormones would decrease, because you're sending this anatomical translation through your physiology, the way that you stand. You're like a conductor of your hormones through your movement, that, oh, cool, I'm winning right now. And so forever, the beginning of ever, think of when you were a baby, if you cry, if you're scared, you shrink up, you defend. If a turtle, they shrink up into their shell. It's like basic standard biology. If you shrink up to protect, and then you open up and you expand like the lotus flower, when you are open, you're open to receive and you feel safe, you feel connected. So the whole body language thing, people would say before you go into a meeting, a date, what have you, do all the stuff, open yourself up, say you're awesome or whatever. And then you go in and you're rolling into the meeting, you're rolling into the date. You're like, cool, I'm already on, as opposed to standing out front, hunched over, staring at your phone, checking your messages, checking some emails that stressed you out, and then walking into the room and you're losing as you go, and there's no momentum. You have to create momentum while you're already in the scenario that matters. So I think you can do this, have a similar type concept, and start to integrate more of that perhaps sensual type experience in your daily life. If you want to have better sex while you're taking a walk, are you able to really experience the sensation of the contact of the weight of your left foot and your right foot? Can you start to bring your awareness into your own breath? Are you breathing into your belly, into your lower back, and sides of your ribs? Start to notice, oh, there's some smells and aromas coming through here. Bad, good, what have you. Oh, the glimmer of the light. Oh, how do these lights in this room affect me? Okay, these blue lights, how do they affect me? Okay, these red lights. Oh, this fire, the moonlight, the sun. Just by bringing your awareness into these situations, now all of a sudden it's almost like you're starting to cultivate this sensual relationship with your reality. Well, what the hell do you think will happen when all of a sudden you have a date with a woman or a guy? It's not going to just stop. You're rolling into that experience of appreciation,
which makes
and so then when.
Oh, sorry, I was saying, which is something valuable to look at as, why would we compartmentalize it at all? Meaning, when you look at when you look at what you just said about moving forward into a meeting or a date and bringing your highest vibe self because you've prepped yourself, the question is like, why would we say, let me make sure to be in my highest vibe right before a date, and the 8 hours before that in the day not carry that same mentality? So what you're speaking to is a way of living where you're actually carrying that momentum of like your highest vibe and being prepared for any moment to be in that.
Yeah, well, that's because we live in a compartmentalized culture. It's not a bad thing or a good thing. Linearity is really great. It's really helpful for a lot of things. You know, it's like the Shiva Shakti. If you were all, right as I said, it's raining. It's like, can you see it's pouring down rain out here? Can you hear the rain? Is that wild? So this pool that I'm standing here beside, it's great. But the only reason that it's a pool is because it has the linearity of the structure of the walls holding in the fluid, holding in the water. So it's not like the fact that we do have some level of compartmentalization in our, the way that we approach life in general. It's not all bad. But if you're too excessively attached on that compartmentalization and the linearity of everything and the separation, well, then it gets too much. Then it starts to become too dry and too scientific and too separate and too, it becomes like inert. It loses its life force. So I appreciate the ability to go both sides. Sometimes in like the new age kind of Burning Man community, it can be too much fluid. It's all water, but no pool. And then sometimes you go into like Western scientific world and it's like all walls, but no water. So it's like, if we can start to converge both those sides, I think that's really where it's at. And so both are fine. I got nothing against, anybody's approach to life. It's just when it becomes too imbalanced in either direction, that's when it becomes problematic. It's either, Alan Watts has a bit about, if you're having a conversation with somebody and they're too spiritual, it's almost like you're drinking an alcohol that's like, it's got too much spirit. It's like, it's all alcohol. And then if you drink another alcohol that's like just all flavors and sweets and, it's like, it's too much flavor. There's not enough spirit. So it's, the combination of the two is really where it's at.
Yeah. And what I really appreciate about your approach is to life in general, and your focus is about how much you really pay attention to the body. And that's been a big part of my journey in the like PTSD and the somatic stuff that I've worked on significantly as it came to as the somatics of my body when it came to healing from repressed sexual trauma and just various other aspects of life. I've gotten super down the road because I retreated into my mind, right? Like that was the safe space. The body was not the safe space for me for most of my life. And then the healing that's happened as I've gone back into the body and done somatic work and PTSD work in various aspects, I've started to develop a deep, profound appreciation for the wisdom that the body carries. And as it relates to relationships as a theme, I used to specifically need to be primarily mentally stimulated for my body to really get behind it in a relationship, to really get engaged in it. I led with my mind. And in my last relationship, the one that this song actually is written about, we met at Burning Man, and it was an instant thing where I saw this woman and we ended up dancing for 4 hours without really talking at all. I think I might have at one point asked her name and that was it. But 4 hours just straight dancing. And I felt like we communicated at a depth through that experience that actually was beyond what I feel like could have been communicated in like an hour of deep conversation. Like there was so much that I felt in that. And I'm curious, how do you feel, how would you describe this spark, as I described, the spark that our bodies can feel and our bodies can communicate with other human beings, specifically in romantic partnership, without needing any sort of words or talking?
There's not that much. generally there's a principle referred to as the 55-38-7 principle of communication. And it came from a guy in the 60s, Albert, I think Meisner might have been his name. But if you look up 55-38-7 principle, you see that they studied the way that we communicate. And what they found with that is that in conversation, if there's incongruence specifically between any of these factors, between body language, the tonality of our voice, and the actual words that are coming out of our mouths, 55% of our attention will go to the body language, and then 38% is tonality, and then there's this little 7% that goes into the stuff that you're saying. So essentially what that means is you can say all this brilliant, you're waxing poetically about all this philosophical jargon, whatever. But what we're really listening to when we're communicating at that more mammalian level, we're listening to how do you say it? We're listening to, what's the tone, what's the pacing of your language, what's the, your hand gestures and your facial gestures. And so if you're having a conversation with somebody and they're saying like, oh man, I'm really happy to be here. I want to stay here for a long time. And they're like, their hips are facing the door and they're kind of pacing back and forth. And they're not making eye contact with you. You're like, my whole body and subconscious and the millions of bits of information my subconscious is able to process is all hearing you scream, I want to get the fuck out of here. And then there's that 7% of your words that are communicating. So I think that really going all in on expression through physicality and really like making that like a focal point for yourself, I think is one of the best ways to create success in your life in any capacity, whatever that would be, whether it's, in business or relationships or whatever it may be. And when you are dancing with somebody, you get to see so much. I mean, you have so much when someone just walks in the room, for people that aren't into dancing per se, start thinking of what if you draw back the dance, and say, okay, cool. The music started. I'm wiggling the hips a little bit. I'm doing the two-step, maybe, it's Latin. We've done some tango or bachata, so what was that dance? You define that dance because there's music playing and you're moving your hips in a way that we've all kind of culturally agreed. Okay, cool. Dance. But what about the way that you walked into that room? Your hips were moving, your contralateral motion, you got a little, your own expression, your own little sway. And what about when you were driving in your car? What about when you're taking a walk with a person? What about when you're out to dinner? Go to Italy and you'll see people gesticulating and their arms are all over the place and their facial gestures. Wow, they're so animated. They're dancing to each other to communicate. And so I think that when you watch a conversation from the lens that I've taken on, I'm essentially watching two people dance. You can kind of start to see like, okay, what does that person's dance communicate? What does the other person's dance communicate? You watch a guy walk into a bar or coffee shop or whatever, and he's hitting on a girl. He's like trying to get her number or something like that. You can see his body language express a thing. You can see her body language express a thing. You know exactly how the conversation is going based off of that physical communication. So
a question that I have for you then is, how about when it comes to specifically trauma and the somatics of trauma stored in the body? One of the big things for me was I felt like I at a certain point, I couldn't trust my body. Like I felt like the way my body would respond, like when it would contract in certain moments, I'd go, this doesn't make sense why it's contracting. This is based on some stored fear and wounding in the system that I don't want to, like, I'd rather it not be doing that. I'm curious for you, how do people that are listening to this right now that want something from life, but their body is reacting in certain ways and they're struggling to identify, is this coming from a wound? Is this coming from my truth? And may not have that trust in their own body. I'm curious, how would you speak to people in that position?
Well, so if you watch somebody dance, you can see the way that they communicate. and sometimes the expression that a person would communicate, and you can think of the dance as like a metaphoric dance in the sense more just the way you move through your life, or a very literal dance, like they're on a dance floor. And you can see if they're running a program, a dance program, they'll kind of do their moves and they kind of look a little bit rigid and structured. And it's like this rote, memorized, okay, I kind of know how to show up in my human suit. This is my human suit dancing. And then there's might be another person that's really able to kind of let go of those inhibitions and really be moved by the music and become like a channel for expression. And in order to get to that point in your life, be able to get the fuck out of the way of yourself, and be able to be like, wow, it's like I don't need to be contracting all the time, holding the steering wheel tight, driving this car. Like there is the potential of getting to a point in the way that you navigate your life that you're like, oh, I can exhale, which I'm working on this. I by no means any like guru-dom of figuring this out, but I think there's something to this where you can have that exhalation, which if you're able to have a full exhalation coming more granularly of like, physiologically tools that you can do, focus on your exhalation is going to be a great way to start to down-regulate and calm the nervous system. So if you can have that, like take the wheel, Jesus, like you can drive this thing, I'm not going to try to force. I'm not going to try to, I know that my mind, it wants this. I'm attached to this specific thing in the past or this idea or the concept. I'm fighting everything to make that thing happen, that story happen. And then there's that other place that a person can be where it's like, I trust that I'm here for a reason. And I trust that everything's being presented exactly as it's supposed to be. And I trust that trauma that I had, perhaps the trauma that I have around that is more my story of that experience. And the reason that it is traumatic is because it was too much information for me to process. I couldn't understand it. Didn't make sense. If I can come to that point where I'm like, just let go. I'm just along for the ride. And it's like, okay, like, that thing because that happened, that turned me to go to this school or caused me to meet this person. And if I hadn't done that, like I wouldn't have ever done that. And now I wouldn't be here. And I love myself. And oh my God, I have so much gratitude for what previously I stored as this trauma. And then all of a sudden I can get to that place where I can let go and be like, okay, cool. I don't feel like a victim. I don't, so within that, coming back to more the realm of like, where I dig into is like, you can feel physically held trauma in the body. Trauma is a big charged word that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I can feel contraction in the body, and anybody can. If you put your hands on somebody's rib cage and you say, take a breath, or you kind of palpate and push around a little bit, pushing their hips, pushing, their organs or their neck, their traps, their jaw. If those muscles are going and clenched down, contracted, their nervous system is bracing for something. They're bracing for impact. And so you can start to tap into the way that a person perceives their reality and their thought world and their emotional world by accessing the physical. And you can access the physical by accessing the mental emotional. Maybe that's you do some kind of art therapy and you paint. Maybe you were sad about a girl and you wrote a song and you expressed out and you allowed yourself to kind of, step aside and be a medium to express out you allowed yourself to emote through music. Maybe you emoted through dance. Maybe you emoted through whatever. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. It's like playing an instrument. There's different wind instruments. There's flutes and didgeridoos and all the different things. But ultimately, it's just air moving down a pipe. And it doesn't matter how the sound comes out. It just matters that you allow that air to move down the pipe. And culturally, we kind of live in a world where we build up that air and it compresses more and it compresses more and compresses more. And then we feel ashamed about the compression that we carry around. And then we get bound up in knots and we're in this double bind situation. And then eventually you snap. So it's like not being ashamed to express out your wind.
Let your wind out.
You gotta break wind.
Hey, deep divers, just want to take a moment and let you know that my new song, Chase Me, is out. It is a cosmic timeless romantic love song. And it's actually the first song that I ever wrote. I was on an island in Thailand with an acoustic guitar doing a self-imposed 5 days of silence. And I decided to write a song for the first time ever. And it's now transformed itself into this beautiful cosmic waltz through the universe. And I'm so happy to say that it is out into the world, as it is the theme. It is giving us context for these podcasts over the next several weeks. I would love it if you would take a moment, go stream it. There's a link in the show notes. I know you'll love it, just like I loved making it. Thank you for being a part of this artistic journey with me. You know, what's funny about that, I love that you basically were speaking to how the, like all the examples you gave of allowing that out, allowing your wind out, came in the form of artistic expression, what would be considered artistic, creative expression. That's such a huge part of my message and what I really believe to be, the way in which we can shift so much is been in recognizing that there is no separation between life force energy, your life force, and your creative energy. They are one and the same. And so when we can allow creativity, our creativity to express in whatever way that is, I believe it's allowing our life force to move through us. And I believe that repression, like you're talking about, it's like the contraction where we're not taking in that full breath, is letting that free in whatever way. Because the reason why people don't, like in my experience of working with anyone who doesn't want to express creatively, whether that's dance, singing, any aspect of that, is because there is some limiting belief or wounding around something their parents said or a past partner or whatever about why they're not good at it, why they sound like shit, why they're not a good dancer, why they're whatever. There's some fear that they're holding that's preventing that expression in the first place. Because when you look at kids, that expression comes naturally. That's all they want to do, is express creatively.
Yeah. So how are you with the resolution of where are you at with the story of your trauma?
Well, thanks for asking. I realized, tying it to what you said around trust and really like getting to a point where you can trust, I realized that I was creating a story in my head of what I thought my body should be doing if I was healed. And instead, when I stepped into more of a trust, what actually happened was, it doesn't actually matter the reason why. In this moment, my body contracts. That's the truth. And I'm trusting that my body is not doing anything wrong. I'm trusting that there's not an issue that needs to be resolved. I am trusting just in the now moment, there's a contraction. And instead of trying to override that contraction and say, you should be okay with this, I would take those contractions and say, okay, let's deal with what is, and say, what is the fear that's here? Right? If every contraction is tied to a fear, what's the fear that's here? And that the cornerstone of that is tying to what you said, is like, I was just starting to trust my body more. I was like, because in reality, me saying that my body shouldn't respond this way, which was, I was creating the lack of trust. When in reality, I could just say, this is what my body's doing right now. Awesome. What is that telling me? So that was like the shift that happened for me, that I have found has deepened my trust with my body, because I'm not mentally telling my body what it should feel. I'm listening to what my body actually is feeling. And that was a big shift.
That's great. Yeah, that's the whole double bind scenario, where you feel guilt about feeling a way that you think that you're not supposed to feel. But I think, getting rid of any of the supposed to words and the should words and all that. I mean, I know that people probably heard this lots of times before, but those words really, they contract your sphincters. Like you don't need any of those words. Or I should have. And you're doing like the what is that called? The conjunctive form. And what is it? I think conjunctive. But yeah, in I believe is it Vietnam, subjunctive. They don't actually have the subjunctive form of language. It doesn't exist. I should have. I don't even know how to process that with my mind, because I haven't created that that structure with my words.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we live in all of these different words of, I should feel this way, or I'm supposed to be here in my life, but instead I'm here. You know, it's like all of those, they're just contractors. You know, and so all your sphincters bind up a little bit, and then you start to have this guilt story, and getting into that point. Like I've had recently had this kind of clinging. I mentioned like relationships and all that stuff. So I've been going in relationship, parting ways with a person, which seems like you have as well. You know, and I've been sharing that like on my podcast, and you know, whatever. I've been trying to be as radically vulnerable as I could be about all that, because I'm like, what else would I talk about? And in that, there's been some clinging of like, you know, looking at the person's social media and thinking about, oh, why they, you know, oh, I made a mistake. I should have done this, and you know, all these different things. And where I've come to that's been very supportive is, instead of being down about, oh, I'm doing it again, I'm fucking, you know, I'm swiping through the stories, I'm doing it again. God, I'm a piece of shit. What am I doing? I'm weak. You know, instead it's just be like, accept that, you know, and like, I'm doing it again. Here we are, you know, and it's like, there's no, I don't need to stack something on top of that. It's just like, cool, I'm doing this thing. I'm eating the Fritos, or I'm eating the fruit roll-ups, or whatever I'm not supposed to do. Instead of having this guilt story that kind of charges that experience, I just say, here they are. It's happening, you know, and then it's like, when I can come to acceptance of that, I think it loses that, you know, when compression makes diamonds, you know, that stress of press, you know, you have that stress, it like creates heat, you know. So when you can release the stress or the story and say like, I'm doing what I'm doing. Here I am.
Where's the line for you? Like, because you're someone, I mean, you are someone who's disciplined. You have a successful business and podcast. You have a very, you obviously take good care of your physical body. And you're well educated. Like, to have these things, there's some level of, you are able to implement your desire and your will to create things that you want. And simultaneously, I agree with you around, it doesn't actually serve to guilt yourself about something that you're doing, because you're doing the best you can. But where is that line of, okay, I'm eating the Fritos again, I'm going to accept this so there's not a contraction, but then tomorrow I'm eating them again, and then tomorrow
because naturally you want progress, you want contribution, you want to feel connected to something, you know, beyond yourself. You want to feel good, you know, and so you know that this is temporary relief of some sort, and you know what it's going to lead to. So when it's something that, I mean, this is, I think, why there's so much, I think we have puritanical religion to thank for most of like the weird, twisted sexual fetishes that exist, you know, because, which is so incredibly brilliant and ironic, that I think the creators of all the freaky shit are the people that say, don't do freaky shit. It's brilliant. Like it's amazing. Like literally, like the ones that are creating the idea of evil and all these moralistic, good, bad, all that stuff. Like they are actually the producers of evil.
What you resist persists, right?
What you resist persists. Yeah. It's brilliant. Like it's amazing. It's so like life is a fucking comedy, man. You know, and so when you like there's a book by a guy called Paul Arden, and it says whatever you think the opposite. Like whatever you think, if it's not kind of opposite from what I personally, with like the narrative that I grew up believing, I'm almost like, I'm skeptical if it's not opposite of what I was told. You know, within that, it's like naturally, what do I want? I want to feel great. I want to be able to, you know, run 10 miles. I want to be able to do handstands. I want to be able to pick people up. I want to be able to breathe in my fullest capacity. I want to, you know, be able to travel. I want to smile. I want to feel energetic. I want to wake up a good hour. I want to go to sleep easily. I want to have great dreams. You know, I want to have sex. I want to, you know, all of these things. So naturally, if I give myself the spaciousness to make the right decisions, I do. It's not like if you give me freedom, I'm just going to burn my house down. If you give me freedom, I'll take care of the house.
But
if
what
you
is
give
it
me
about
all these
you?
rules?
What is it about you? Like, can you reverse engineer that? So where Aaron Alexander, when given the freedom, makes those choices, whereas there are so many people on this planet where the quick dopamine hits of social media are the go-to every single day in an avoidance pattern of some discomfort that they don't want to look at, that leads to a habitual use of other avoidance behaviors. And for whatever reason, we see, like, you are not the average individual. I would say that you, in many ways, are a high performing individual. And so I'm trying to identify, what is it where you can say that if given the spaciousness, maybe there's a couple days where you're scrolling through your ex's social media, but you're aware that that's not serving, and yet eventually you will find your way to that, where other people know that exercise and not eating the donuts is going to be more of how they want to live, but can't seem to make those decisions. What's the difference there?
I think having, it's like Viktor Frankl, of course, with a question like that, I'd have to revert back to, Man's Search for Meaning. I feel like if he was here, I'd be like, ask Victor. I think he's the one to field this question to. But his big idea among many, he was really, logotherapy was his thing. He was really brilliant. For people who don't know his story, he went through several different concentration camps, and he was creating this thing called logotherapy, and he was a psychologist and just this really brilliant man. And he, throughout his experience in the concentration camps, managed to somehow, keep his head up and maintain this outlook on life that got him through the experience. That would be like, he had every reason to kill himself or, end it or just die, just lose the will to be in his body anymore. And that was one of the things that he noticed with people that would die, was they would kind of lose that will and lose that why. Was his thing.
He said you could tell when someone was going to die soon. You could see the give up. You could see the light drain from their bodies well in advance of their death.
Yeah. And so his whole thing, among many ideas, was, having really getting down to the root of what is your why of being here. And I think most people's whys are shit. Your why is, I want to have more money so I can get more chicks, or, whatever. It's like there's no why there. So I think that coming from a place of first, like, really honing in on, like, why are you even alive? Like, what is the point of this? You got to pay taxes, and you got to put deodorant on, and you got to shave your face. It's like, it's work to be in this body, And so if it feels like, is it, like, what's the purpose that really drives you? And so asking yourself that question, like, it sounds almost kind of like morbid to start to ask yourself that, but it's like, why am I here? And if you can come down to something that's like, that's why I'm here. Even if it's just an illusion, because ultimately everything is, if that illusion drives you for it to be worthwhile to be here, then it's like, okay. And then I think something else that's a really valuable thing is kind of coming back to the same concept of, like, sorting out that why, write that out. But then also being very specific with what it is you want to create, and so going in, something that I've done that I've found helpful, working with a friend / coach called Lauren Zander. She gave me this thing, and this is similar to a lot of other things actually, but like 12 sections of your life. Break down, what exactly do you want from your career, from your relationships, from your family, from your travel, from your fun, from your money, from, like, all of these things, and I think a great exercise for people, if you want something that's like a granular, tangible, I'm going to do this, is break down. You can start with just those categories, say career, relationships, family, money, because it's kind of different than career, investing and all that stuff. Fun, travel, whatever categories work for you. There's lots of you can follow different models like this on the internet. And within that, write out, like, specifically down to a T, what makes you light up in that category. Like really focus on the visualization of what that is. Write out the way that you feel, write out maybe even the way that your house smells, write out the way that your clothing feels, the way that your relationships feel, like being very specific with that. And then I think that to me has been very helpful to actually create a roadmap, and start to put a compass in your hand of say, where am I going? Because I've spent a lot of my life personally, and I'm not mad at myself about this. I think it's fine. Everything happens, perfectly as it does. And I am being led and I trust, which sometimes it's easier to really truly feel that way than others. Right now, I feel that way in this conversation. We'll see how I feel tomorrow morning. But I think that when you can get in that place where you can create that vision, then you can start to, choose your destiny. But for me, I've spent a lot of time really wondering, why the hell am I here? I've had a lot of my experiences are historically have felt very lonely and have felt very disconnected and have felt very aimless. And I'm okay with all of those moments because I think that ultimately they, allowed me to have compassion for that experience. And so I guess I'm saying, a few things. One, I'm kind of saying like disregard everything I'm saying because I'm just as lost as anyone. And then two, back to like Tony Robbins' hoorah, manifestation, The Secret, write your stuff out because it matters. So I think that one, pick your direction, really be specific about it. Two, focus on the why portion of it, not just the what. Not that just, $1 million, great. It's like, no. Like, why do you give a shit to have $1 million? What do you want to do? You just want to buy a car? If that's enough to get you to make the $1 million, great. But probably something, a little more meaningful than that would get you to that point. So I think that's a fine starting point is just being very specific about what it is that you want, and also starting from a place of, why do you want it in the first place?
Beautifully said. And now's the time. If any of you create community members who are here live have any questions, type it into the chat box as we wrap this up. The way that I speak to this, Aaron, is passion. Like truly finding your passion is so important, because your passion, that energy, is what gets you through the hard times. Like life will get hard. There are moments where you may want to give up, or it feels like it's all falling apart, or it's just not working. And it is in finding your passion. If what you are doing is not something you are passionate about, when life gets hard, there's that fuel that you need to get through that isn't there. It's not there. And so I encourage so many people to do exactly what you said, because that diagramming of what you want out of your life, hopefully the step that what it's doing energetically is helping you identify the things that you're passionate about. When you start to identify what you actually want from your finances and your career and your relationships, my hope is that you start to notice a pattern. You're like, whoa, here's where my passion lies. Here's where I find purpose. Here is that jet fuel that will help me when I'm feeling completely empty and I'm facing these obstacles.
Yeah. And then, so again, whatever you think the opposite. So when you get, by creating the roadmap of where you want to go, hopefully it's illustrious and magnificent and, a rad dream that you can be excited about. And hopefully you're not just being realistic and playing it safe and doing all of those things. Like, make it cool, and make it be something you're like, wow, like, could I? It's like, yeah, go for it. And I think that by making it, you shoot for the stars, you might not hit the stars, but you might wind up on the moon, or however that's set. Like, really, like, make your goals amazing. Make it something that you can be passionate about. And then also recognize that some of the saddest people in the world are the people that have achieved their goals, because they had a story that they've been running, that I will feel a certain way when I make it to the metaphoric moon, which is it's a very literal thing. The people that they make to the moon, they come back. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do now? You win your Olympic gold medal or whatever your thing is, and then you get done, you're like, oh, I feel terrible. I have my narrative, my story is gone. I have nothing to work towards. So it's like, life is, and then that's your first mountain. There's a book called The Second Mountain. That's also a nice reference. And so it's like acknowledging that, one, make your story brilliant, make it amazing. Two, recognize that depending upon what your goals are, there's a good chance you're going to get to that point, and you might be kind of let down unless you had a good time doing it, unless your whole experience was like, like people ask me fairly regularly about like, what's your fitness regimen? And, how do you working out you must work out all the time. I'm like, no, like my life is fitness. Like today, just before this, my chosen activity was to do acro yoga with a beautiful girl in a pool. That was great. A great reason to hang out. Let's hang out. We'll do acro. I'll pick you up, throw you around. Like, this would be fun. And then me and a couple friends, we went in some ruins that were closed. So we had to barter our way into the back door and pay the guy 400 pesos, and sneak in the back. And it was raining and we're running down the thing. And it's like, that was fitness. We climbed a fence. It was raining. That's cold thermogenesis. We're using our eye muscles to look out over the distance. We're in community and connection. Essentially, that was a fitness experience. So if you can start to make it so that your whole life is more robust with the things that you love now, then you're not going to lead up into like martyring yourself for some specific goal that inevitably will become a false summit. And then you get there and you have this letdown. So I think that they're figuring out like how, as soon as possible, like now, how do I make it so that these things, whether I arrive at a false summit or not, I was grateful for the journey because I was doing the things that I loved.
There it is. That's a mic drop right there. A beautiful way to end. And Aaron, I think you hit the nail right on the head. It's at the end of the day, whether you get to your mountaintop or not, if you do get there, there's another mountaintop to get to next. If you don't get there, you're still living life every single day on the way there. So can we learn to love life? Like, can we love the journey? And I think you're such a great example of someone who is doing that. Pretty much every time I see you, you're laughing, smiling, joking. And you've incorporated fitness into your life. You built a whole brand around that. And I'm just so grateful that you took the time to come in here and drop some wisdom bombs with all of us. You want to let people know where they can find you and what you're up to?
Well, something that I've been doing in my intros, my podcast, is trying to not sell things. And which, selling things is great because all the things that I sell, I think actually create betterment in people's worlds. But it's something that I've been doing that I find nice is like something other than like the standard. Okay, now I'm going to pitch a thing. So something that a good practice that people can do now is reach out to 3 people that you care about and go through and just tell them a couple reasons that they're meaningful in your life. So for my like pitch Aaron's stuff, this is my pitch. Reach out to 3 people in your life that you care about. And maybe you haven't told them that, for a while, or maybe you have or whatever, but just send them a message. You send them a text right now. You can write them a letter even, or whatever, buy them some flowers, whatever it is. And just tell them at least one thing of why they are meaningful in your life. And that's my pitch for my stuff.
I love that. There you go. If you've got some value out of this podcast, a way to pay it forward is to spread some love to 3 people. 3 people. Aaron, you have my word that I will do this right after we get off. That I will text 3 people and let them know how much I appreciate them. That is a deep thank you to you for being on here. Hopefully all of you who are listening to this feel the same way and pass that forward, pay that forward. What an amazing way to carry this out. Aaron, once again, thank you. Thank you for taking the time, especially in Tulum. I know how difficult it can be. I was just there. I look forward to continuing to connect and drop in with you, brother. I'm a big fan.
Thank you, dog. I appreciate you too.
All right. Much love, everybody. I want to remind you that always, in all ways, you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to this, to watch this, and to be a part of this journey of figuring out how to love ourselves more and love life more. Have a great rest of your day.